Hey, welcome to Cinema Gulp. This is Ben.
And this is John.
And today we're doing a quick shot review of The Girl on the Train.
I used to watch this perfect couple. They were the embodiment of true love. I want to start my life over again.
The Girl on the Train is the latest film to be adapted from the suburban thriller genre of novels. It escapades as an independent-style pulp mystery on the surface, but deep down it's just another run-of-the-mill sex thriller with little to no suspense and some pretty sleazy, trashy characters that are nearly impossible to get behind. No pun intended. Director Tate Taylor puts way too much on his plate, and the viewers as well, as he makes choices that affect the quality of the storytelling. I didn't like The Girl on the Train. I from the get-go, I didn't know much about it going in. I don't think either of us did. I knew I wanted to see Emily Blunt. I was hearing buzz that she was good, and I guess she was. She was, everyone in this movie is a piece of shit. Like, you don't care about anybody in this movie. From the get-go, I was thinking to myself in the theater, oh God, because I noticed how overboard they were going with editing, how overboard they were going with throwing in a bunch of dialogue from the novel. It just seemed like the scream for like, hey, kind of like Gone Girl. And they'd even kind of throw in that like shitty generic, well, the Trent Reznor score is amazing in Gone Girl, but they tried to kind of like replicate it with some generic shitty stuff like during the intense scenes.
It's super generic. I was actually going to mention that this movie was too quiet. There were so many scenes that just felt flat because there wasn't even really ambient sound going on to make it the scene feel alive. No. But there was very little score used throughout the film, and sometimes that can work to enhance a scene, to not use score, or even a film doesn't have to have an overuse of score. But this film lacked anything from musical department, the sound department. This movie just fell flat on all those levels. The
mystery wasn't tense to me. To me it was more goofy because it dealt with things like alcoholism and stuff like that.
But this ought to do it.
I was just always sort of laughing at Emily Blunt's character, going like, I just want to see her get drunk and fall over.
Yeah, she was the best when she was drunk, actually. Most interesting in the film.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, because she's such a drunk and she's the main character of this film, she's an unreliable narrator. And that causes, when you're watching a mystery and you're trying to rely on the facts and the information that you're being given, you kind of know right off the bat that you're not going to trust a lot of what you're being told in this film. And a good mystery needs to have an engaging story. It needs to be doling out information in a way that keeps you interested from beginning to end, keeps you guessing, gives you red herrings that aren't obvious, gives you misdirection that you can actually enjoy and go along for the ride and say, oh, they tricked me there. Oh, I thought they were going to do this, but they went this way. I mean, that's a good mystery, and this had none of that. It was so obvious from the beginning to the end that it never had me guessing anything other than the way it played out.
That's the problem. This movie was constantly trying to misdirect its audience. It was trying so much. I mean, the setup of, like you said, the narrator, the catalyst, the one we're following is a drunk. So clearly, oh, we can get away with this and this. What they say isn't reliable. The problem is, yeah, the story is weak, and the story, when you see it, which we're not going to give away, could happen pretty much every single day up in Covenant Hills on the Real Housewives of Orange County.
Wait, so she's saying I'm drinking too much and my marriage is falling apart?
If you really dissect the story, that shit probably happens every single day up there. A bunch of people cheating on everybody and a bunch of people looking at each other through windows and shit. It's just a sleazy tale of suburbia when it all comes down to it.
Yeah, I mean, it felt cliched to say it, but that's what it felt like I was watching, was an episode of Desperate Housewives or whatever.
Tequila makes me happy. Yeah, we're drinking on the porch. You got a problem with that?
I mean, obviously, I don't read any of these pulp, Fabio sex novels or whatever the fuck they put out there for ladies to read. But it felt like I was watching one of those happen.
Yes.
I mean, all the sleazy sex scenes that happened earlier in the film were so pointless.
They were laughable.
Laughable. And they're not gratuitous because we saw too much. They were gratuitous to just be involved in this film, to be put in this film. It was not needed.
You know
It was gratuitous for the sake of like, why is everyone having sex in the first opening act of this film? It's not really necessary.
It was to make that first act titillating
and sexy.
And sexy. And because it was kind of a boring setup for this film anyway. I mean, you were already... And the whole, like, this movie is called Girl on a Train. The train aspect of this film is such a minor thing. It plays, obviously, if anyone's seen the trailer, it plays into, like, why some of the plot is going to take place, but in such a stupid way. And I think the train is... Calling this the girl on the train is somewhat misleading. It really has so little to do with this film.
I want to get back to misdirection just really quickly. The misdirection could work in the hands of somebody who knows how to use it. The problem with this movie was every single element and every single reveal is expository dialogue that just completely goes, hey, guess what? You remember that scene in the last one where there was a little thing that you didn't know? Well, here's what that was, and someone has to tell you. And sometimes it's so cheap, it's done through the narration going on in the voiceover. They don't let the actions show the viewer. We're not stupid. No, you don't have to tell us. Let us see it. Have it reveal in some other way.
Yeah, very spoon-fed. Many of the characters, like you said, none of these characters seem like real people. Especially, I mean, the three women, they all have kind of backstories that deal with tragedy or loss and things like that. And so they kind of have their moments to act on screen, and it's all overly dramatic at times. I think Emily Blunt does a pretty good job with a few of her scenes where she has to kind of break down or not so much be a real person because she's this over-the-top drunk that doesn't seem realistic. But there was some okay performances by the women throughout. The men, though, were terrible. The male characters in this film were ridiculously written and had some terrible dialogue. I don't want to point out which character is which and who's who. One of the main male characters has some of the stupidest dialogue I've heard in a movie in a long time.
I love Emily Blunt, and I think she's great in almost everything she does. She's very diverse. She can play quirky, funny. She can play really serious. She can play badass, which we saw. This one just required her character to be such a lush and such a bug-eyed drunk that when she's crying, her face is already so red and puffy and full of like water that it just seems a little inauthentic, sort of. It's good because she's always good, but the character, I just still was not buying the character. Not to the fault of her, but just the character itself.
No, yeah, it's the script, it's the screenwriting. These characters were written terrible. Every single character in this movie is a creep in some way. So yeah, when you've got a movie like that where there's no one to root for, I don't want to say there aren't movies out there that you can enjoy that don't have someone to root for, but this one was bland, just so obvious. I mean, my biggest knock on this movie is as a mystery, it never was mysterious at all.
Look, there's no redeemable characters in Pulp Fiction, but they're so fucking likable because they're just amazing characters. That's the problem. You can have sleazy characters doing bad things. You gotta make something charming about them. You can't just have it melodramatic. I don't think there's 1 second for comedy in this movie. Oh! Or even just showing a character breaking out of this crust of depression that this movie is overlaid with, you know?
There were no real laughs. There were a couple. We laughed a few times, but it was definitely unintentional.
And we got the theater laughing with us.
Yeah, that's true. That was probably the most enjoyment I got out of the whole movie.
So on the audience chuggability meter, for me, I think a lot of moviegoers are going to feel the same way we did. It drags. It's really long. It's not an entertaining movie, nor is it very intense, nor is it really all that mysterious. It's pretty easy, folks, to figure out what the end result of this movie is going to be about halfway in. Is that a safe assumption?
I think so.
So for audience chuggability, for me, it lays right dead center in the flat.
I agree completely. Flat for me.
Okay, and on the gulp gauge, I'm going to go and give this movie a 2.5.
For my gulp gauge score, I'm going to give this a 2. See it if you want. See if you're looking for a mystery, or maybe you've read the book and you're really interested. There could be fans out there who read this as a book and are just dying to see this as a film.
I thought it was a sequel to Snakes on a Plane. And as always, if you guys like this review, doesn't mean you have to like the movie, please leave us a comment down in the comment section below. Click like. Also check us out on Twitter and Facebook at Cinema Gulp.
And look for some fun stuff coming up for Halloween. We drink your cinema.
I drink it up!
You're out of luck. I'm rolling down the stairs, too drunk to fuck. I'm too drunk to fuck. You're too drunk to fuck. Too drunk to fuck. I'm too drunk to fuck.